it is really one of the great sort of humanitarian documents.
It was the foundation stone which led to the State of Israel and the return of Jews to Jerusalem and Palestine, which became Israel.
The Balfour Declaration is hugely significant. It was only 67 words long, and yet it had the most far-reaching consequences for Jews, for Arabs, and for the entire region.
It's an extraordinary romantic story, isn't it?
I think it's an important occasion which should be celebrated, obviously, both in Britain and Israel.
It was a colonial document in which one colonial power gave the land populated by one person to another person.
My name is Robert Lloyd George, and I'm the great-grandson of David Lloyd George, the Liberal Prime Minister from 1916 to 1922. After a lot of discussion in the British Cabinet in 1917, on November the 2nd, they held a cabinet meeting, Lloyd George as Prime Minister presiding, Arthur Balfour as Foreign Secretary supporting it, to write this letter from the Foreign Secretary, Balfour, to Lord Rothschild as head of the Jewish community in Britain, saying that Her Majesty's government view with support and approval the creation of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, notwithstanding that they would respect and protect the rights of the indigenous inhabitants.
My great-grandfather is David Lloyd George. I'm immensely proud of my great-grandfather in many, many respects. I think he was a truly radical social reformer. I think in relation to the Balfour Declaration, he was profoundly mistaken.
So who am I, Roderick Balfour? Well, I am Arthur's great-great-nephew. So Arthur, well, there you have a very fine de Laszlo portrait of Arthur, and I think it encapsulates a lot of his character. The Declaration matters because it was an expression, a wish by Her Majesty's government to lend its support to re-establishing Palestine, Israel, as a home for the Jewish people at a time when they were seeing mass persecution.
There was a case for a Jewish state as a haven for the Jews who were suffering persecution in Eastern Europe and other places. We still have to recognize that the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, whichever way you look at it, involved a monumental injustice to the Palestinians. More than half the population became refugees, and the name Palestine was wiped off the map.
Gwyneth is my first cousin, and she's also great-granddaughter of Lloyd George, the Prime Minister. Gwyneth is married to an Israeli, Avi Shleim, and he's a historian who I like and respect enormously, but he's anti-Zionist. And so I have long discussions and arguments with them, but I stick to my view that it was an ideal. It was a moment in history, in 1917, when we could give a push to something which should have happened many, many centuries ago, but the right of the Jewish people to go back to their original homeland in Israel and create a new country.
People that were turfed out of Jerusalem were scattered all over the world and persecuted left, right and centre, should finally go back there and create something very remarkable. It's one of the most extraordinary stories of mankind.
You're asking me if there's any part of the Declaration here that I would draw attention to. I think in the context of the present tensions, yes, it's that central tenet. It being clearly understood that nothing should be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine.
It's a somewhat ambiguous document because on the one hand it promises the Jews a national home, and on the other it says this mustn't prejudice the Arab community there. And that was a difficult circle to square, as history has shown.
I think that central tenet has not really been fulfilled, and I think it's getting worse with the problems of evictions through the settlements. The rights of the Palestinians do look as though they have been compromised by the fact that Israel is in control, the Jewish side of Palestine is in control. But the Arabs brought a war against Israel to wipe it out in 1967, and the Arabs, all around them, lost. And I'm afraid if you lose a war, there are consequences.
I think people don't quite always think of the significance of defining the Palestinian majority as non-Jewish. One of the things that Palestinians feel very strongly is that their identity, their culture, their history is erased.
In 1917, the Jews were 10% and the Arabs were 90% of the population of Palestine. And the declaration flatly contradicted the principle of national self-determination, whereby the majority opt for national self-determination, not the minority.
In one sentence, we said we support the Jewish national home, but we want to defend the rights of the indigenous inhabitants. There you have the dilemma from the beginning. But the conflicts that have occurred since then all stem from this original declaration, which had a dilemma at its heart, yes.
Lord Rothschild and I are going to commemorate it with a dinner actually on the 2nd of November.
And we have 2 prime ministers attending, a foreign secretary, a number of Americans from the previous administration, one from this administration.
I believe we should celebrate it, not only because of my family tradition, but because I have visited Israel. I am aware of the great achievements that have been made by Israel in the last 70 years.
To celebrate or to commemorate the 100 years of Balfour Declaration is something that's unacceptable to us. It's not that we don't recognize Israel. We do recognize Israel. But we believe it's high time for the British government, to apologize for the Palestinian people for 100 years of continued suffering.
I personally would not like to celebrate the Balfour Declaration in any way, shape or form. I myself would prefer to go and picket the celebration and remind them that this is no cause, this is a cause for shame rather than pride.
In terms of celebrating the declaration, I'm sort of split. I think in terms of when I'm with the diaspora, the Jewish population, I'm very much celebrating because I can see what it means for them.
Look, I think everybody is aware of the problems. I don't think there'll be anything kind of triumphalist about the dinner, but I think it means a lot to a lot of people, and therefore the occasion should be marked.
I consider that Britain has a particular historical responsibility for this situation. Whenever I go to Palestine, Palestinians, when they know I'm British, I keep quiet about the fact that I'm the great-granddaughter of David Lloyd George, will say, it's all your fault. If the British government recognised a Palestinian state, that would be a gesture towards Palestine that would be greatly appreciated, and it would mark a turning point.
In the context of the Middle East, Israel is a shining example. I mean, it's a democratic country. It's a leader in agricultural technology. It's created an extraordinary presence in cyberspace in the Fourth Industrial Revolution.
The alternative to a two-state solution is a one-state solution, one state with equal rights for all its citizens, regardless of religion, ethnicity, gender, or anything else. This is something that Israel would oppose to the bitter end. As a Jew and an internationalist, I think this is a noble vision. What could be more attractive than both communities sharing the land and working together for for a better future than either of them has had for the last 100 years?
Well, I think it's going to be very difficult ever to achieve peace from my observation and visiting there, because it's a very small territory where people are living very close to each other, the different communities.
I believe that if the right groundwork is put in and the right framework, then yes, it would make great sense for the Palestinians to have their own state, or would it be states? Listen, who am I? Many great men have tried to resolve this over the last 50 years and not got very far. So I'm not going to venture too much of an opinion, but that's clearly got to be the way that things go.